The alarm didn't wake Marlene Brooks because she'd barely slept. 5:30 in the morning, October 12th, 2024. Saturday, the kind of California autumn morning that started cool and ended scorching, the kind that made everything feel temporary, like the world was holding its breath before the heat arrived. Marlene sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the room behind the Red Oak Diner, staring at the cracked ceiling tiles she'd been meaning to replace for 3 years. 35 years old, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. Hands that never stopped moving, never stopped working, never stopped trying to hold together a life that felt like it was always one bad week away from collapse. The room wasn't much. 12 by 10 feet, a bed she shared with her son, a dresser with drawers that stuck, a hot plate on a card table because the diner's kitchen closed at 9 and they still needed to eat. A bathroom down the hall with a shower that ran cold more often than hot. No windows except the one that looked out into the diner itself, which meant no privacy, no separation between work and life, no escape. This was home, had been for 8 years. Ever since she'd scraped together enough money to buy the diner from the previous owner, who'd been just as desperate to leave as Marlene had been desperate to have something, anything that was hers. She stood, moved through the familiar morning routine. Coffee from yesterday reheated on the hot plate. Instant. The cheap kind that tasted like burnt plastic but had enough caffeine to make the day possible. She drank it black because milk cost money, and money was something she never had enough of. The diner itself was quiet in that pre-dawn way that made every small sound echo. The hum of the ancient refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock that was 15 minutes fast because she'd never gotten around to fixing it, the creak of floorboards as she moved through the space she knew by heart. Every worn booth, every stained countertop, every piece of equipment held together with duct tape and prayer. Red Oak Diner. The name came with the building. She'd thought about changing it, but signs cost money and the regulars knew it by that name anyway, so why bother? It wasn't fancy, wasn't clean in the way that new restaurants were clean, but it was honest, working class, the kind of place truckers stopped for coffee and eggs, the kind of place where locals came when they couldn't afford anything better. Marlene had been running it alone for 8 years, up in 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week, breakfast, lunch, dinner, the same menu she'd inherited, eggs, bacon, burgers, fries, coffee that was always fresh and strong because that was the one thing she refused to compromise on. If you couldn't trust the coffee, you couldn't trust anything. The money was terrible, always had been. She charged what the neighborhood could afford, which meant charging barely enough to cover costs. Rent on the building was $850 a month. Utilities another $200. Supplies maybe $300 if she bought carefully and didn't waste anything. And then there was Vincent's cut, $200 every single week for 2 years. Protection money, he called it. Protection from what she'd asked the first time. From problems, he'd said, and she'd understood immediately what that meant. Pay us or we become the problem. Pay us or things break. Pay us or customers stop coming. Pay us or you disappear. She paid, hands shaking, because she had no choice. Because calling the police meant the police would ask questions and take reports and ultimately do nothing because men like Vincent were careful, were smart, never left evidence, never crossed lines that got them arrested. And in the end, Marlene would still be alone with a man who now had a reason to be angry. So she paid. $200 every Monday morning, 52 weeks a year, $10,400 annually that should have gone to fixing the stove that only worked on 2 burners, to replacing the roof tiles that leaked every time it rained, to buying her son shoes that fit instead of shoes 2 sizes too small that he wore without complaining because he understood even at 8 years old that money was tight and complaining didn't help. After paying rent, utilities, supplies, and Vincent, she was left with maybe $400 a month in good months, $600 if she was lucky. That was supposed to cover food, clothes, soap, toothpaste, school supplies, everything else that made life possible. It didn't. It never did. She was always behind, always borrowing from next week to pay for this week, always one broken appliance or one sick day away from complete disaster. But she survived, because that's what you did. You survived. A sound from the prayer room pulled her from her thoughts. Wyatt, her son, 8 years old as of last month, too smart for his own good, too observant, too aware of things a child shouldn't have to be aware of. He appeared in the doorway rubbing his eyes, small for his age, 4'1", maybe 55 pounds, brown hair that stuck up in the back no matter how much she tried to smooth it down, wearing the same shirt he'd worn yesterday because laundry cost quarters and the laundromat was 3 blocks away and she was always too tired. "Morning, Mama." "Morning, baby. Sleep okay?" Wyatt shrugged. He didn't sleep well, neither did she. The bed was too small and the room was too warm, and the sounds from the diner never really stopped, and even at night. Trucks passing on the highway, the rattle of the ancient air conditioning unit, the occasional drunk stumbling down the alley behind the building. "You hungry?" Marlene asked. "Not yet." "Eat something anyway." "Can't go to school on an empty stomach." She scrambled 2 eggs on the hot plate, 1 egg each. That's all they could afford most mornings. She split a piece of toast between them. No butter. They were out. Had been for 3 days. Butter could wait until Monday when she did the weekly shopping. Wyatt ate mechanically, not really tasting it. His mind was already somewhere else. He was like that. Thoughtful. Internal. He'd learned young that the world didn't care about kids who complained or made noise. Learned that being quiet and helpful meant one less thing for his mother to worry about. "I can help today," he said. "After breakfast, before the rush." "It's Saturday, baby. You should play." "I like helping." Marlene looked at her son, this 8-year-old boy who should have been playing video games or riding bikes or doing whatever normal 8-year-old boys did. Instead, he was offering to wipe tables and refill ketchup bottles and bust dishes because that's what he'd always done. Because in this family of 2, everyone pulled their weight. "Okay," she said quietly, "but just for a little while." They finished breakfast in silence. Marlene washed the plates in the small sink. Wyatt dried them with a towel that had more holes than fabric. Then they moved into the diner proper. 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes until opening. Marlene flipped on the lights. The fluorescent tubes buzzed and flickered before settling into their harsh, unflattering glow. She turned on the coffee maker. The good one. The commercial-grade machine she'd bought used 6 years ago and maintained religiously because good coffee was the only thing that kept the truckers coming back. The smell filled the diner, rich, dark, the one luxury she allowed herself. She could survive on instant coffee in the back room, but the customers deserved better. Wyatt moved through this space with practiced efficiency, wiping down tables, checking salt and pepper shakers, straightening the laminated menus that were sticky with years of use. He was good at this. Thorough. He noticed things adults missed: a crumb under a booth, a smudge on a window, a napkin dispenser that was running low. Marlene watched him work and felt her chest tighten. This wasn't the childhood she'd wanted for him, wasn't the life she'd imagined when she was pregnant and alone and terrified at 27. She'd thought things would get better, thought that if she just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, eventually they'd have more than this. A real home, stability, maybe even a savings account. But 8 years had passed and they were still here. Still in the back room, still counting pennies, still one disaster away from losing everything. The first customer arrived at 6:03, Earl, 72, retired trucker. Came every morning and ordered the same thing: 2 eggs over easy bacon toast, black coffee. He sat in the second booth from the door. Always the same booth, had been for the 4 years since his wife died, and he'd stopped knowing what to do with his mornings. Marlene poured his coffee before he asked. Set it down with a small smile. Earl nodded. Didn't speak much. Didn't need to. Some customers came for the food. Some came for the company. Earl came because it was better than sitting alone in an empty house remembering what used to be. More customers trickled in. The Saturday morning regulars. Construction workers grabbing breakfast before heading to job sites. Families who couldn't afford the fancy brunch places downtown. Locals who'd been coming to the Red Oak for so long they didn't remember when they started. Marlene moved through the routine on autopilot, taking orders, cooking eggs, flipping pancakes, pouring coffee, refilling coffee, smiling even when her feet hurt and her back ached and she'd been standing for 3 hours straight without sitting down, because sitting down meant falling behind, and falling behind meant angry customers. And angry customers meant bad tips, and bad tips meant not making rent. Wyatt stayed out of the way, bussed tables when customers left, wiped down counters, kept the coffee station stocked with sugar packets and creamer cups. He was quiet, almost invisible. But Marlene always knew exactly where he was, always kept him in her peripheral vision. Because the world wasn't safe for 8-year-old boys, especially 8-year-old boys whose mothers were too busy working to watch them every second. At 9:45, three men walked in. Marlene recognized them immediately. Her stomach dropped. Vincent Caruso, 40 years old, tall, not bulky but solid in a way that suggested he could handle himself in a fight. Dark hair slicked back, leather jacket that tried too hard to look expensive. Gold watch that definitely was expensive. The kind of man who smiled with his mouth but never with his eyes. Behind him, two others. One was Marcus Webb, 38. Vincent's boyfriend, though they kept that quiet in public because this part of Bakersfield wasn't the kind of place where you advertise that sort of thing. Marcus was shorter than Vincent, but broader. Ex-military build, shaved head, permanent scowl. He didn't talk much, didn't need to. Everything about his body language said, "I hurt people for a living." The third man was someone Marlene didn't recognize. Younger, early 30s maybe. Nervous energy, eyes that darted around the room like he was cataloging exits. They didn't sit at the counter, didn't sit in one of the open booths near the front. They went straight to the back corner. The booth with the high backs that created a little cocoon of privacy. The booth where people sat when they didn't want to be overheard. Marlene's hands started shaking. She grabbed a coffee pot to give herself something to hold, something to do with the trembling. Vincent came every Monday to collect his $200. That was the arrangement. Mondays. Only Mondays. The fact that he was here on a Saturday with Marcus and a third man sitting in the private booth meant something was happening. Something bad. She forced herself to walk over, forced a smile onto her face. "Morning, coffee." "3," Vincent said. He didn't look at her, was studying the diner like he'd never seen it before, like he was measuring it, pricing it, deciding what it was worth. Marlene poured 3 coffees. Her hands shook enough that she nearly spilled the third cup. Vincent noticed. His smile widened slightly. "Anything else?" "Not now," Vincent said. "We're just talking." That was a dismissal. Marlene backed away, returned to the counter, tried to look busy. But her heart was pounding and her breath was shallow, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Wyatt appeared at her elbow. "Mama, who are those men?" "Nobody," Marlene lied. "Just customers." But Wyatt was smart, too smart. He'd seen Vincent before, seen his mother pay Vincent every Monday morning before the diner opened, seen the way she counted out bills with shaking hands, seen the fear she tried to hide. "It's the bad man," Wyatt said quietly, so quietly only Marlene could hear. "Hush, don't say that. Just stay away from them, okay?" Wyatt nodded, but he didn't move far, just retreated to his usual corner where he kept his backpack and the homework he sometimes did between wiping tables. From there, he could see the entire diner, including the back booth. The 3 men talked. Marlene couldn't hear what they were saying, couldn't read their lips from this distance, but she could see their body language. Vincent animated gesturing, explaining something. Marcus quiet listening, nodding occasionally. The third man taking notes on his phone. They stayed for 20 minutes. Nursed their coffees, didn't order food, just talked and talked and talked. Wyatt watched them. He'd learned young that the best way to understand the world was to pay attention, to watch, to listen. Adults thought kids were invisible, thought kids didn't notice things or didn't understand things or didn't matter. But Wyatt noticed everything. He noticed Vincent's hand gestures, noticed the way he pointed subtly toward the door, noticed Marcus checking his phone and then looking out the window, noticed the third man typing something and then showing the screen to Vincent, who nodded approvingly. Something was being planned. Wyatt didn't know what, but he knew enough to recognize planning when he saw it. Knew enough to understand that whatever Vincent was explaining required coordination, required timing, required multiple people working together. And he knew that usually meant something bad. At 10:05, the 3 men stood. Vincent dropped a $5 bill on the table. Didn't wait for change. They walked toward the door. Vincent paused as he passed the counter. Looked directly at Marlene. "See you Monday." It sounded like a promise and a threat all at once, then they were gone. The door swung shut behind them. The bell above it chimed cheerful and mocking. Marlene exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Her hands were still shaking. She set down the coffee pot before she dropped it. Wyatt appeared beside her again. Mom, are you okay? I'm fine, baby, I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. Her instincts were screaming that something was wrong. That Vincent being here on a Saturday meeting with Marcus and that third man talking quietly in the back booth meant something. Meant danger. Meant trouble. She just didn't know what kind yet. Wyatt returned to his corner, picked up his backpack, pulled out a small notebook he kept for school. But he wasn't doing homework. He was writing something, just a few sentences, something he wanted to remember. 3 men, Vincent, Marcus, 1 other, talked about 11, talked about Harley, talked about the van. Wyatt didn't know what it meant. But he wrote it down anyway, because his teacher said writing things down helped you remember. And something told him this was important. Something told him he might need to remember. The morning rush continued. More customers arrived. The diner filled with the sounds of clinking silverware and conversation and the sizzle of bacon on the griddle. Marlene moved through it all, mechanically taking orders, delivering food, clearing tables, smiling at customers, even though her mind was elsewhere. At 10:45, a sound cut through the ambient noise. Deep, rumbling, powerful. The unmistakable growl of a motorcycle engine. Marlene looked up. Through the front window, she saw a man swing off a black Harley Davidson. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing jeans and a black t-shirt and a leather vest with patches she couldn't quite read from this distance. He pulled off his helmet. Mid-40s, graying beard, the kind of weathered face that came from years of sun and wind and hard living. He walked toward the diner with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been afraid of walking into a room of strangers. The door opened, the bell chimed, and Garrett Crawford stepped into the Red Oak Diner. He wasn't what Marlene expected. Bikers in movies were always huge and always covered in tattoos, always radiating menace. Garrett was big, sure, 6'3", maybe 240 pounds. But there was something calm about him, controlled. He looked around the diner with the kind of careful assessment that suggested military training or law enforcement background, taking in exits, noting the positions of other people, making sure he understood the space before committing to it. His vest had patches. Marlene could see them now. Hell's Angels across the back in large letters, President patch on the front, other patches she didn't recognize. A flag, some kind of insignia. The vest itself was worn well used, the leather soft with age. Garrett walked to the counter, sat down on one of the stools, set his helmet on the stool beside him, looked at Marlene and gave a small nod. Polite, respectful. Coffee? Marlene asked. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Please, Black. She poured. Her hands had mostly stopped shaking, but not entirely. She set the cup in front of him carefully. Thank you, Garrett said. He wrapped his hands around the cup but didn't drink yet. Just held it, like he was warming his hands, even though it was already 70 degrees outside. Marlene wanted to say something, wanted to ask why a Hells Angels president was in her diner at 11 in the morning on a Saturday, but she didn't, just smiled and moved away to give him space. Garrett sipped his coffee, looked around the diner again. His eyes lingered on Wyatt for just a moment, the boy in the corner with the backpack and the notebook. Then his gaze moved on. Professional, not threatening, just aware. 3 minutes later, the door opened again. Vincent Caruso walked back in. Marlene's stomach clenched. She'd known Vincent would return. He'd said 11 o'clock in that quiet conversation in the back booth. She just hadn't known why, hadn't understood what was happening. Now she did, or was starting to, because Vincent's face lit up when he saw Garrett, a performer's face. Fake enthusiasm, fake friendliness. You must be the guy with the Harley. Garrett turned, looked at Vincent. Something shifted in his expression. Not fear, not aggression, just a slight hardening, a recognition that the man approaching him was dangerous in some undefined way. That's me, Garrett said. His voice was calm, steady, giving nothing away. Vincent Caruso, Vincent extended his hand. We talked on the phone about the bike. Garrett shook his hand. The handshake was brief, professional, no warmth to it. Right, the listing. Beautiful machine, Vincent said. He slid onto the stool next to Garrett. Too close, invading personal space in a way that was clearly intentional. I ran the Vian like you said. Everything checks out clean. I'm ready to close the deal if you are. Cash deal, Garrett said. It wasn't a question. Cash deal, Vincent confirmed. He patted his jacket pocket. 12,000, right here. Count it if you want. Garrett didn't move to count it, just looked at Vincent, reading him. And Marlene could see, even from across the diner, that Garrett didn't trust this man, didn't believe this friendly performance. But he was playing along, going through the motions. You got the title transfer ready, Garrett asked. In my car, Vincent said. He stood, smiled. Give me 2 minutes. I'll grab the paperwork and we'll be done. He walked toward the door, paused, pulled out his phone, typed something, then stepped outside. Marlene felt ice in her veins. She'd seen enough movies, heard enough stories to know what was happening. Vincent wasn't getting paperwork. He was signaling someone, calling someone, setting something in motion. She looked out the window, saw Marcus Webb standing beside a black van parked 2 spaces down from Garrett's Harley. Saw 2 other men, the nervous one from earlier, and someone new moving into position near the corner of the building. This was a trap, an ambush. They were going to take Garrett. Right here, right now, in broad daylight in front of witnesses, because they didn't care about witnesses, didn't care about consequences, knew that by the time anyone called the police, they'd be long gone. Marlene's first instinct was to say nothing, to let it happen. Because getting involved meant making Vincent angry, and making Vincent angry meant losing everything. Her diner, her home, maybe her life. But then she looked at Wyatt, her 8-year-old son sitting in the corner with his backpack and his notebook. Her son who'd spent his entire childhood watching his mother live in fear. Her son who'd learned that the way you survived in this world was by keeping your head down and not making waves and never ever standing up for what was right. If standing up meant putting yourself at risk. What kind of lesson was that? What kind of life was that? And before she could talk herself out of it, before she could think about consequences, or calculate risks, or convince herself to stay silent, she opened her mouth to warn Garrett. But someone beat her to it. Wyatt had been watching. Of course he had. Nothing happened in this diner without Wyatt noticing. He'd seen Vincent and his men talking. He'd heard the word Harley in the time 11 and the mention of the van. He'd watched Vincent make that phone call. He'd seen Marcus move into position outside. And he understood. Maybe not all of it, maybe not the exact details, but enough. Enough to know that the man at the counter, the biker with the calm eyes and the careful way of moving, was in danger. Enough to know that if Wyatt didn't do something right now, something terrible was going to happen. He stood, picked up his backpack, walked across the diner with a child's complete lack of self-consciousness. Adults never really looked at kids, never really saw them. Kids were background noise, invisible. Wyatt stopped next to Garrett's stool, looked up at the big man in the leather vest. Garrett glanced down, saw the boy, saw something in the kid's face. Fear, urgency, purpose. Hey there, Garrett said quietly. Wyatt leaned in close, so close that only Garrett could hear. His voice was a whisper, tight, scared but determined. Drive away. It's a trap. They're going to take you. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Garrett looked at Wyatt. Wyatt looked back. And in that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, trust, the understanding that this child was telling the truth, that this wasn't a joke or a game or a misunderstanding. This was real. Garrett's hand moved to his phone. 1 text, 3 words, typed fast, sent immediately, code red now. Then he stood, slowly, calmly, like nothing was wrong. Like he was just a customer finishing his coffee and getting ready to leave. Thanks for the coffee, Garrett said to Marlene. He pulled out his wallet, left a 20 on the counter. Vincent was still outside, talking on his phone, gesturing to Marcus and the other men, organizing, coordinating, so focused on his plan that he didn't see Garrett moving toward the door, didn't see the boy backing away, didn't realize that everything had just changed. Garrett pushed open the door, stepped outside. The sun hit him full in the face. He squinted, kept moving, walked straight to his Harley. Vincent turned, saw him coming, The fake smile faltered. Confusion flickered across his face. "Where are you going?" Vincent called out, trying to sound casual, trying to salvage the situation. "Change of plans," Garrett said. He swung his leg over the Harley, fired up the engine. The sound was immediate and overwhelming. A roar, a warning, a declaration. Vincent stepped forward. "Wait, what about—" Garrett didn't answer, didn't explain, just revved the engine once. Loud, deliberate, making sure everyone within 3 blocks heard it. And then the world changed. From the east end of the street, the rumble of more engines. Deep, powerful. Multiple bikes moving in formation. 6 of them, 8, 10. Black Harleys with Hell's Angels vests. From the west end more. Another wave, another wall of chrome and leather and controlled fury. Within 90 seconds, the street in front of the Red Oak Diner was filled with motorcycles. 20 of them. 30. They boxed in Vincent's car, surrounded the black van, cut off every exit, a perfect encirclement executed with military precision. Vincent's face went white. Marcus Webb, still standing by the van, tried to get inside, tried to start the engine, but 3 bikes blocked him in. He was trapped. The nervous man and the other one scattered. Ran. Didn't make it 10 feet before more bikers appeared blocking their escape routes. Not touching them, not threatening them, just standing there. Walls of muscle and leather. Unmovable. A woman swung off one of the bikes. Mid-40s. Leather vest like Garrett's. VP patch on the front. A scar ran down her left cheek from temple to jaw. Her eyes were hard. Unforgiving. Rachel Scar Monroe walked straight up to Vincent, stopped 2 feet away, stared at him. "You just made a serious mistake," she said. Her voice was calm, almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. Vincent tried to smile, tried to summon that fake charm. "This is a misunderstanding. You were just trying to kidnap our president," Rachel interrupted. "In broad daylight, on a public street. Did you really think we wouldn't know? Did you really think we wouldn't come?" Vincent looked around, saw the bikes, saw the faces of 30 Hell's Angels watching him with expressions that promised violence if he made one wrong move. Saw that he was completely surrounded with no way out and no backup and no plan for this scenario, because he'd never imagined a scenario where the prey fought back. "You misunderstood," Vincent said, voice shaking now. "I was buying a bike, that's all. Just a transaction." "Yeah," Rachel said, "we misunderstood. Just like you're going to misunderstand when I tell you to get in your car and drive away. Just like you're going to misunderstand when I tell you that if you ever come near Garrett again, if you ever even think about messing with Hell's Angels, we will end you. You understand that misunderstanding?" Vincent nodded, couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "Get out of here," Rachel said. "Now." Vincent scrambled to his car. Marcus was already in the van, engine running. The nervous man and the other one ran to catch up. Doors slammed, tires squealed. Within 30 seconds, they were gone, disappeared around the corner like they'd never been there. The Hells Angels didn't follow, didn't need to. The message was clear: stay away or else. Garrett killed his engine, climbed off the bike, walked back toward the diner. Inside, Marlene stood frozen behind the counter, heart pounding, hands shaking worse than before. Her mind trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand how a normal Saturday morning had turned into this. Wyatt was still in the corner, still holding his backpack, his face pale but his eyes bright, alert. He'd done something, something big, something dangerous, and he was old enough to understand that there would be consequences. Garrett pushed open the door. The bell chimed. He walked straight to where Marlene stood. "Are you the owner?" Marlene nodded, couldn't find words. "Your son just saved my life," Garrett said. He looked past her to where Wyatt stood. "What's your name, kid?" "Wyatt," the boy whispered. Garrett walked over, knelt down so he was at Wyatt's eye level, this massive man in leather folding himself down to meet an 8-year-old's gaze. "You've got serious guts, Wyatt. You know that?" Wyatt shook his head. "I was scared." "Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave," Garrett said. "Bravery is doing the right thing even when you're terrified. And you did the right thing. You saw danger and you didn't look away. You warned me. That takes courage most adults don't have. Are you going to be okay? Wyatt asked. Will those men come back? Garrett's expression darkened. Maybe. Probably. Men like that don't give up easy. He stood, turned to Marlene, pulled a card from his pocket. White cardstock. Simple black text. A phone number. Nothing else. If they come back, if they bother you, if anything happens, you call this number. Doesn't matter what time, day or night, you call and I'll answer. Understand? Marlene took the card. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Why would they bother us? Garrett hesitated, chose his words carefully. Because they know Wyatt warned me, or they will know, soon. And men like Vincent don't forget things like that. The words hit Marlene like a physical blow. Her son, her 8-year-old son, was now a target because he'd done the right thing, because he'd been brave, because he'd saved a stranger's life. Oh, God, Marlene whispered. What did you do, baby? What did you do? Wyatt looked at his mother, then at Garrett. His voice was small but steady. I helped, like you always tell me to. If someone needs help, you help them. Marlene wanted to scream, wanted to grab her son and run, wanted to pack their few belongings and leave Bakersfield tonight and never come back. But where would they go? She had no money, no car, no family, no options. She looked at Garrett, this stranger, this biker, this man who'd brought danger into her life just by existing. What happens now? She asked, voice breaking. Now you keep that card close, Garrett said. And if Vincent comes back, you call me immediately. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Just call. He walked to the door, paused, looked back. Your son is a hero, Garrett said. Don't let anyone tell him different. Then he was gone. The door swung shut. Through the window, Marlene watched him mount his Harley. Watched the other bikes start up one by one. Watched the entire club ride away in formation engines, roaring a thunder that shook the windows and rattled the dishes and announced to the entire neighborhood that the Hells Angels had been here, and anyone who'd seen what happened should remember it. The diner fell silent. The few customers who'd witnessed everything sat frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the ticking of that clock that was always 15 minutes fast. Marlene looked at the card in her hand, then at her son. Wyatt stood in the corner backpack, still on his shoulders, face pale but chin raised, defiant, scared but not backing down. We're in trouble, aren't we, Mama? Wyatt asked quietly. Marlene wanted to lie, wanted to tell him everything would be fine, but she'd never lied to her son, and she wasn't going to start now. Yes, baby, we're in trouble. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Marlene served customers on autopilot, poured coffee, took orders, cooked food, smiled when appropriate, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the scene over and over. Vincent's face when the bikes arrived, the way Marcus had looked at the diner as he drove away, angry, calculating, promising revenge. She closed the diner at 9 p.m. like always, locked the door, counted the register. The day's take was $412. After expenses, she'd clear maybe $80, barely enough for groceries for the week. She and Wyatt ate dinner in the back room, leftover soup from yesterday. Crackers, water. They didn't talk. What was there to say? Everything had changed, and neither of them knew how to articulate it. At 10:30, Marlene tucked Wyatt into bed. He was exhausted. The fear and adrenaline had burned through him. He fell asleep almost immediately. Marlene sat on the edge of the bed, watching him sleep, memorizing his face, this child who'd changed her life, who'd given her purpose when she had none, who'd made her strong when she'd wanted to give up. And now he was in danger, because he'd been brave, because he'd done the right thing. At 11:15, a sound outside made her freeze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming toward the diner. Marlene stood, walked quietly to the front, peeked through the blinds. Vincent Caruso stood under the streetlight across from the diner, just standing there, looking at the building, his face illuminated by the yellow glow, expression unreadable. He stood there for 5 minutes, not moving, not doing anything, just watching. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke for maybe 30 seconds, hung up. He looked at the diner one more time, And Marlene could have sworn, though she was 50 feet away and the light was bad, that he smiled. Then he walked away, disappeared into the darkness. Marlene's hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the counter to stay upright. She knew what that was. A message? A promise. I know where you are. I know where you sleep. I'm coming back. She pulled out Garrett's card, stared at the number. Her thumb hovered over her phone. She wanted to call, wanted to beg for help, wanted someone to tell her what to do. But it was 11:30 at night, and she'd only met Garrett 6 hours ago. And calling a stranger to save her from another stranger felt insane. Felt like admitting complete defeat. So she didn't call. Not yet. Instead, she went back to the room, lay down next to Wyatt, stared at the cracked ceiling, and waited for dawn. Knowing that when the sun rose, Vincent would return. Knowing that this time he wouldn't be interested in motorcycles or fake deals or pretending to be friendly. This time he'd be coming for them. Sunday morning came too fast. Marlene woke at 5 a.m. without an alarm. Hadn't really slept. Every sound in the night had jolted her awake. Every car passing outside. Every creak of the building settling. Every distant siren that might have been coming closer. She lay in the narrow bed staring at the ceiling, Wyatt breathing softly beside her, and tried to figure out what to do. Pack and leave. That was the smart choice. The safe choice. Take what they could carry and just go. Catch a bus to anywhere, Fresno, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Start over somewhere Vincent Caruso couldn't find them. But she'd tried starting over before. 8 years ago when she'd arrived in Bakersfield with a 6-month-old baby and $300. Starting over meant sleeping in her car for 2 months. Meant begging for a waitressing job. Meant working 3 jobs until she'd saved enough for a deposit on the diner. Meant building something from nothing through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. And now she was supposed to throw all that away. Walk away from the only home Wyatt had ever known. From the only stability they'd managed to create. For what? To run to another city and have the same thing happen again. To spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next Vincent Caruso to show up and demand payment for protection she never asked for. She was tired, so deeply tired. Not just physically, though. God knew 8 years of 16-hour days had taken their toll. But tired in her soul. Tired of being afraid. Tired of paying men who threatened her. Tired of teaching her son that the way you survived was by keeping your head down and never fighting back. What kind of lesson was that? What kind of life? At 6 a.m. she got up, made coffee, the instant kind that tasted like chemicals. Wyatt woke shortly after. Neither spoke. They ate breakfast in silence. Cereal with milk that would expire tomorrow. The last of the bread toasted dark because the toaster only had 2 settings barely warm in charcoal. Marlene opened the diner at 6:30, half an hour late. Some of the regulars were already waiting outside. Earl in his pickup truck, 2 construction workers in a van, a woman Marlene didn't recognize. She unlocked the door, turned on the lights, started the coffee, moved through the routine mechanically while her mind spun in circles. Stay or go, fight or run, risk everything or lose everything. The morning passed slowly. Customers came and went. Most didn't notice anything different, but a few did, the ones who paid attention. The ones who'd been there yesterday when the bikers showed up. Earl lingered over his coffee, finally spoke. You okay, Marlene? Fine. Don't look fine. Marlene forced a smile. Just didn't sleep well. Earl studied her face. 72 years old, retired trucker who'd seen every kind of trouble the road could throw at you. He knew what fear looked like. Those men yesterday, the ones who left in a hurry, they coming back. Marlene's hands tightened on the coffee pot. I don't know, but you think they might. She didn't answer, didn't need to. Earl could read the truth in her silence. He pulled out his wallet, left a 20 for a $6 breakfast. You need help, you call the police. Don't try to handle this yourself. The police can't do anything unless something happens. Then make sure nothing happens, Earl said. He stood, headed for the door, paused. My daughter's number is in the phone book. Shirley Patterson. You need a place to stay. You call her. Tell her I sent you. Then he was gone, and Marlene felt tears burn her eyes because even strangers, even customers, who barely knew her, could see she was in trouble, could see she was drowning. At 1 p.m., the phone in the back room rang. Marlene almost didn't answer, let it ring 4 times before she picked up. Hello, silence on the other end, then breathing, heavy, deliberate. I know you're there, Marlene said, voice shaking. You should have left. Vincent's voice, calm, almost pleasant, like he was discussing the weather. I gave you 24 hours. That was generous, more than generous. What do you want? I want you gone, you and that boy, by tonight. Pack whatever fits in a bag and walk away. Leave the keys on the counter. Don't come back. This is my diner. I'm not. It was your diner, Vincent interrupted. Now it's a liability. Your son embarrassed me in front of my people. Made me look weak, made me look stupid. I can't let that stand. You understand that, right? It's not personal. It's business. He's 8 years old. He didn't mean, I don't care what he meant. I care what he did. And what he did requires consequences. So you have two choices. Leave tonight and we're done. Or stay and see what happens when I run out of patience. The line went dead. Marlene stood holding the phone, hands shaking, chest tight. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to grab Wyatt and run and never stop running. But she'd been running her whole life, running from poverty, running from failure, running from the fear that she wasn't strong enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't enough, period. Maybe it was time to stop. She pulled out Garrett Crawford's card, stared at the number. Her thumb hovered over the dial button. What was she doing at calling a biker she'd met yesterday, trusting a stranger to save her from another stranger? That was insane. That was desperate. But desperate was all she had left. She dialed. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, he answered. Garrett. His voice was calm, alert, like he'd been waiting for this call. It's Marlene from the diner. You said, I remember what happened. The words came tumbling out. Vincent's call, the threat, the ultimatum, 24 hours to leave or else. She heard herself talking faster and faster, voice rising with panic, and hated how weak she sounded, how helpless. Where are you right now? Garrett asked when she finished. At the diner. It's just me and Wyatt. We're alone. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in you don't recognize. I'm on my way. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Your son saved my life. That means something. That means I don't walk away when you need help. Lock the doors, Marlene. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up before she could argue. Marlene stood in the back room, phone in hand, wondering what she'd just done. Wondering if she'd made things better or infinitely worse. Wyatt appeared in the doorway. Was that Mr. Crawford? Yes. Is he coming? Yes. Are we leaving? Marlene looked at her son. 8 years old, too young to have to ask questions like that. Too young to understand what it meant when adults fought over territory and pride and money. I don't know, baby. I don't know what we're doing. Wyatt walked over and hugged her, his small arms wrapping around her waist. And for a moment, just a moment, Marlene let herself believe that everything would be okay, that someone was coming to help, that they weren't alone. At 1:30, the rumble of motorcycles filled the street outside. Marlene looked through the window. 6 bikes, Garrett in the lead, Rachel beside him. 4 others she didn't recognize. They parked in formation, dismounted in unison, moved with the kind of coordinated precision that came from years of riding together. Garrett walked to the door. Marlene unlocked it, let him in. He looked around the diner, taking inventory, noting exits, windows, sight lines. Then his eyes found hers. Tell me everything. She did. The phone call, Vincent's exact words, the threat, the deadline. Garrett listened without interrupting. When she finished, he pulled out his phone, made a call. Yeah, it's Garrett. Vincent Caruso just made a direct threat. Phone call to the victim. Gave her 24 hours to leave or face consequences. Yeah, she's willing to testify. Okay, I'll have her call you. He hung up, looked at Marlene. That was Detective Frank Morrison, Bakersfield PD. He's been trying to build a case against Vincent for 6 months. Extortion, intimidation, assault. The problem is no one will testify. Everyone's too scared. I wonder why, Marlene said bitterly. Because they're alone. But you're not alone anymore. Garrett gestured to the window where Rachel and the others stood watch. We're here, and we're not leaving until this is finished. What does that mean? Finished how? That depends on Vincent. If he's smart, he walks away, finds easier targets, leaves you alone. And if he's not smart, Garrett's expression darkened, then we make him understand that you're under our protection, and Hell's Angels protect their own. I'm not one of yours. I don't even know you. Your son saved my life, Garrett said. His voice was quiet but firm. That makes you family, whether you want it or not. The word hit Marlene like a physical blow. Family. She hadn't had family in so long she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. To have people show up, to have people stand beside you, to not face the world completely alone. I can't ask you to do this, she whispered. You're not asking, I'm offering. Big difference. Rachel came inside, shut the door behind her, looked at Marlene. Vincent's making his rounds. I've got people watching. He hit 3 other businesses this morning, collecting his weekly cut. He'll come here tomorrow. Monday. That's his pattern. So we have until tomorrow, Marlene said. No, Garrett corrected. He has until tomorrow to decide if he's going to walk away or escalate. Either way, we'll be ready. Marlene wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this would work out. But she'd learned young that the world didn't care about what you wanted. The world cared about what you could survive. What if this makes it worse, she asked. What if Vincent decides I'm more trouble than I'm worth and just burns the place down with us inside? Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. When I was 23, I was homeless, living under a bridge in Oakland, stealing food to survive. No family, no friends, no future. One night I tried to steal a wallet from a guy outside a bar. Big mistake. Guy was a Hell's Angel. Could have beaten me half to death. Should have. Instead, he bought me dinner, got me a job, gave me a place to stay. Told me the club was built on one principle. You protect people who can't protect themselves. You stand up for the weak. You don't let bullies win. That man saved my life, and now it's my turn to do the same for someone else. That's the code. That's what we do. He looked at Marlene with eyes that had seen too much, but somehow hadn't lost the capacity for hope. I'm not going to let Vincent hurt you or your son. That's a promise, not because you can pay me, not because I'm getting something out of this, but because it's the right thing to do, and sometimes that has to be enough. Marlene felt something break loose in her chest, some wall she'd been building for 8 years, some defense against caring, against trusting, against believing that anyone would show up when it mattered. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we stay. Garrett nodded. Good. Now here's what happens. Rachel and 2 others will stay here tonight. Rotation shifts. You won't be alone. Tomorrow morning you open like normal. Pretend nothing's changed. Vincent will come to collect his money. When he does, you tell him you're not paying anymore. You tell him you're done. He'll threaten me. Yes, and you'll have your phone recording everything he says. Every threat, every word. That goes straight to Detective Morrison. Evidence for the case they're building. And if he gets violent, then we step in. But we don't start anything. We just make sure he can't finish anything either. It was a plan, not a good plan, but better than running. Better than spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. Okay, Marlene said again, I'll do it. The rest of Sunday passed in a strange fog. The diner stayed open until 9. Customers came and went. Most didn't notice the bikers outside. The ones who did mostly stayed quiet. This was Bakersfield. You learned not to ask too many questions. Wyatt spent the afternoon with Garrett. They sat at the counter talking about motorcycles, about the mechanics of engines, about the history of Hell's Angels, about what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself. Marlene watched from behind the grill, watched her son's face light up as Garrett explained things in simple terms an 8-year-old could understand. Watched the way Garrett listened when Wyatt asked questions, never talking down, never dismissing, treating the boy's curiosity with respect. This was what a father looked like, Marlene thought. Not the biological father who'd never stuck around. Not the string of temporary boyfriends who drifted through her life in those early years. But this, a man who showed up, who paid attention, who made a child feel like he mattered. At 8 p.m., Rachel came inside, sat down next to Marlene at the counter. You holding up okay? Marlene shrugged. I don't know what okay feels like anymore. Yeah, I remember that feeling. Garrett said you escaped an abusive situation. Rachel nodded. 17 years ago, boyfriend who thought hitting me was how you showed love. I stayed for 3 years because I didn't have anywhere else to go. No money, no family, no options. Then one night he broke my jaw, and I decided dying was better than living like that. She touched the scar on her face. This was my goodbye present. He came after me with a knife, tried to make sure I never left. Club found me in an alley, took me to the hospital, paid for everything, gave me a place to stay until I healed. Then they taught me to fight back, taught me I was worth protecting, taught me that family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shares your battles. Marlene felt tears burn her eyes. I'm not that brave. You're here, aren't you? You could have run, should have run, but you stayed. That's brave. I stayed because I'm tired of running. Same thing, Rachel said. Bravery isn't not being scared, it's being terrified and doing it anyway. They sat in silence for a while. The diner was empty. Wyatt had fallen asleep in one of the booths. Garrett stood outside, talking to the other bikers on watch. What happens if this goes wrong? Marlene asked quietly. What happens if Vincent doesn't back down? Rachel looked at her, eyes hard, unflinching. Then we make sure he can't hurt you, whatever it takes. I don't want anyone getting hurt because of me. Too late. We're already involved. We don't walk away now. That's not who we are. At 10 p.m., Marlene carried Wyatt to the back room, tucked him into bed. He mumbled something in his sleep about motorcycles and engines and how Mr. Garrett said he could learn to ride someday when he was older. Marlene kissed his forehead, watched him sleep, and made a decision. Tomorrow she would face Vincent Caruso, would tell him no, would stand her ground for the first time in her life. And whatever happened after that, at least Wyatt would see his mother refuse to back down, would learn that sometimes you had to fight, even when you were terrified, even when the odds were impossible. Because the alternative was teaching him that bullies always won. And that was a lesson she refused to pass on to her son. Monday morning arrived too fast. Marlene woke at 5. The back room was dark. She could hear movement in the diner. The angels on night watch, 2 of them. She'd learned their names yesterday, Travis and Leon, both ex-military, both carrying themselves with that same coiled readiness Garrett had. She got up, made coffee, real coffee this time, from the diner's machine. If this was going to be her last day here, she wanted it to start properly. Wyatt woke at 6, sensed the tension immediately. Is today the day? He asked. Yes, baby. Are you scared? Marlene looked at her son, decided to tell the truth. Yes, I'm terrified. Me too, Dee. That's okay. Being scared is normal, but we're not going to let being scared stop us from doing what's right. What if he hurts you? He won't. Mr. Garrett and the others will make sure he can't. Promise, Marlene wanted to promise, wanted to lie, but she'd never lied to Wyatt and she wouldn't start now. I can't promise nothing bad will happen, but I can promise I'll do everything I can to keep you safe. And I promise we're not alone anymore. We have people standing with us. Wyatt processed that, nodded slowly. Okay, Mama, I trust you. Those words nearly broke her. This child, this beautiful, brave child who still trusted her even after everything, who still believed she could protect him even though she'd barely been able to feed him most days. The diner opened at 6:30. Marlene propped the door, turned on the lights, started the coffee. Garrett and Rachel arrived shortly after. Positions. Garrett at the counter, Rachel by the window, the others outside. A perimeter. Customers started arriving. The usual Monday morning crowd. Most didn't notice anything different. Those who did see the bikers mostly kept quiet. One trucker asked what was going on. Marlene told him there'd been some trouble. Nothing to worry about. He paid for his coffee and left quickly. At 9 a.m., Detective Morrison arrived. Mid-50s, gray hair, the weathered face of a cop who'd seen too much for too long. He ordered coffee, sat at the counter next to Garrett. They talked quietly. Marlene couldn't hear what they were saying, didn't need to. She understood. Police couldn't stop Vincent from coming. couldn't arrest him for threats made over the phone with no witnesses. They could only react after something happened, after someone got hurt. But if Vincent made threats in person, in front of witnesses, while being recorded, that was evidence. That was prosecutable. Morrison left at 9:30. Garrett explained the plan. Vincent comes at 10. That's his schedule. Every Monday, 10 a.m., he collects from you and 3 other businesses on this block. When he arrives, you tell him you're not paying. He'll threaten you. You'll have your phone recording in your apron pocket. Just keep him talking. Get him to say explicitly what he'll do if you don't pay. Get him to incriminate himself. And if he tries to hurt me, then I step in. But I wait until he makes the first move. Has to be self-defense. Has to be clean. Understand? Marlene nodded. Understood. They were walking a tightrope. One wrong move, and this became assault. Became vigilante justice. Became something that could get Garrett arrested instead of Vincent. At 9:50, her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. 10 minutes. Better have my money ready. Her hands started shaking. She pulled out her phone, opened the voice recorder app, hit record, slipped the phone into her apron pocket. Garrett saw her do it, nodded. You've got this. Just stay calm. Let him talk. What if I can't do it? What if I freeze? You won't. You're stronger than you think. Marlene wanted to believe that, wanted to feel strong, but mostly she felt sick, felt like she might throw up, felt like every instinct in her body was screaming to run to the back room and lock the door and never come out. At 9:58, Wyatt appeared from the back. He'd been doing homework, staying out of the way, but now he stood beside his mother behind the counter. Baby, go to the back room. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you. I want to stay with you. Wyatt, please, I need to know you're safe. He looked at her, then at Garrett, then back to his mother. I'll go, but if he tries to hurt you, I'm calling the police myself. Deal. Wyatt disappeared into the back. Marlene heard the lock click. One less thing to worry about. At 10 a.m. exactly, the door opened. Vincent Caruso walked in. Alone. No Marcus, no henchman. Just Vincent in his leather jacket and gold watch and fake smile. He looked around the diner, saw Garrett at the counter, saw Rachel by the window. His smile faltered, just for a second. Then it was back. Plastic. Meaningless. Morning, Marlene. She didn't answer, just stood behind the counter, hands gripping the edge, willing herself not to shake. Vincent walked to the counter, pulled out a chair, sat down, like this was a social call, like nothing had happened. You got something for me? He asked. Casual? Friendly? No. Vincent blinked. What? I said no, I'm not paying you anymore. The smile vanished. Excuse me. Marlene's voice was shaking, but she pushed the words out anyway. I'm done. No more money. No more protection payments. You want to collect from someone else, that's your business, but you're not collecting from me. Vincent stared at her, processing. Then he laughed, short, sharp, humorless. You think because you got some bikers backing you up, you can just stop paying? Is that how this works? I think I'm tired of paying for protection I never needed. I think $200 a week for 2 years is enough. I think I'm done being scared of you. Vincent's jaw tightened. The mask was slipping, the pretense of civility cracking. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. He stood, leaned across the counter, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive, cloying. Let me explain something to you. This neighborhood I run it. Every business from here to 5th Street pays me. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. You don't just get to opt out because you found some muscle. This is bigger than you, bigger than your kid, bigger than these bikers. I'm still not paying. Vincent's face went hard. The mask was completely gone now. What remained was ugly, brutal. You've got until Friday, that's 4 days. You bring me what you owe, plus a penalty. Call it 800. You pay that, we're square. We forget this conversation happened. And if I don't, then bad things happen. Accidents, fires, your kid walking home from school and taking a wrong turn. You understand what I'm saying? There it was, the threat, clear, explicit, exactly what they needed. Marlene's voice was barely above a whisper. You're threatening my son. I'm explaining consequences. There's a difference, ma'am. Get out of my diner. Vincent smiled. Cold, reptilian. You've got until Friday. Don't make me come back here. He turned, started walking toward the door, and that's when everything went wrong. The door burst open before Vincent reached it. Marcus Webb stormed in, and he had a gun. Marlene's world went into slow motion. She saw Marcus raise the weapon, saw Vincent's eyes go wide with shock, saw Garrett moving from his seat at the counter. What the hell are you doing? Vincent shouted. Marcus ignored him. The gun was pointed at Marlene, but we talked about this. No witnesses. We clean this up now. Marcus put the gun down. We had a deal. We scare them. We don't. You're too soft. Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. She knows too much. The kid knows too much. We end this now. Marlene couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The gun was 3 feet from her face. She could see Marcus's finger on the trigger, could see the emptiness in his eyes, the complete lack of hesitation. This man was going to kill her. Right here, right now. Marcus, you pull that trigger and every cop in Bakersfield comes down on us, Vincent said. Desperate now. Put it down. We can still fix this. No, Marcus said. We can't. She's seen too much. She knows too much. And that kid of hers, he cost us a $20,000 score. Someone has to pay for that. He cocked the gun. Time froze. Marlene heard a scream, realized it was coming from the back room. Wyatt, her son, was screaming. The sound seemed to break Marcus's concentration. Just for a second, his eyes flicked toward the back room. That second was all Garrett needed. He moved like lightning, crossed the space between counter and door in 2 strides. His hand locked on Marcus's wrist, twisted, hard. The sound of bone breaking was audible throughout the diner. Marcus screamed. The gun clattered to the floor. Rachel was already there, kicked the gun away, pulled Marcus's arms behind his back, drove him face first into the floor. And then the diner was full of people. Police bursting through the door. 4 officers, 6, 8, guns drawn, shouting orders. Everyone on the ground. Hands where we can see them. Marlene dropped behind the counter, hands over her head, heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst from her chest. Through the chaos, she heard Detective Morrison's voice. Secure the weapon. Cuff them both. I want statements from everyone. It was over in less than 3 minutes. Marcus Webb in handcuffs, wrist bent at an unnatural angle, screaming about police brutality. Vincent Caruso also cuffed, shouting that this was a misunderstanding, that he hadn't done anything, that Marcus had gone rogue. Morrison walked to where Marlene still crouched behind the counter, extended his hand, helped her up. You okay? Marlene nodded, couldn't speak. The adrenaline was wearing off. She was starting to shake, starting to realize how close she'd come to dying. Did you get it? The recording, Marlene fumbled in her apron, pulled out her phone. The recording app was still running, 22 minutes. Every word Vincent had said, every threat, every admission. Morrison took the phone. This is gold. With this plus the assault with a deadly weapon, we've got them both. Federal charges, 20 years minimum. 20 years. Vincent and Marcus would be in prison for 20 years. Gone. Unable to hurt her, unable to hurt Wyatt, unable to threaten anyone else. It was over. It was really over. The backroom door burst open. Wyatt ran out, ran straight to Marlene. She caught him, held him. They sank to the floor together, crying, shaking, holding each other while the police processed the scene around them. Garrett knelt beside them. His face was calm, but his eyes held concern. You did good, Marlene, real good. Took guts to stand up to him like that. I thought he was going to kill me. I thought Marcus was going to, but he didn't. You're safe. Wyatt's safe. That's what matters. Marlene pulled back, looked at Garrett, this stranger who'd walked into her diner 2 days ago and changed everything, who'd stood beside her when running would have been easier, who'd promised to protect her son and then done exactly that. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for staying, for helping, for not letting him. She couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Garrett understood. That's what family does, he said simply. We show up. We... The police took statements from everyone. Marlene told them everything, starting with 2 years of protection payments, the threats, the phone call Sunday, Vincent's visit this morning, every detail, and she gave them the recording. Morrison listened to it twice. His expression darkened with each word Vincent had spoken. When it ended, he looked at Marlene with something approaching admiration. This is everything we needed. Explicit threats, acknowledgement of an extortion racket, threats against a minor. Combined with the assault charge against Marcus Webb, we can dismantle his entire operation. You just freed 23 other businesses that have been paying Vincent for years. 23. Marlene's voice was small. There were 23 others. At least, probably more. You're the first person brave enough to stand up and testify, the first person who didn't run when he threatened them. Marlene looked at Wyatt. Her brave, beautiful son, who'd started all of this by whispering a warning to a stranger, who trusted his instincts when 6 adults before him had looked away. I had help, she said quietly. The police finished up around noon. Vincent and Marcus were taken away in separate patrol cars. Vincent was still shouting about lawyers. Marcus was silent, dead-eyed. The look of a man who knew his life was over. After they left the diner fell quiet. Marlene sat at the counter, Wyatt beside her, Garrett and Rachel and the other angels who'd been on watch. 8 people who'd barely known each other 3 days ago, now bound together by something bigger than friendship, by survival, by the choice to stand when running would have been easier. What happens now? Marlene asked. Now you rebuild, Garrett said. Morrison said there'll be a trial, 6 months maybe. You'll have to testify, so will I. So will Wyatt probably about the warning he gave me. But Vincent and Marcus aren't getting out on bail. Flight risk, danger to witnesses. They're locked up until trial. And after the trial you get your life back. No more payments, no more threats, no more fear. Marlene tried to imagine that, a life without fear, without looking over her shoulder, without counting pennies to see if she could afford both rent and food, without teaching her son that survival meant keeping quiet and never fighting back. She couldn't quite picture it. 8 years of fear had a way of making hope feel impossible. But maybe that would change. Maybe with time she'd learn to breathe easy, learn to trust that tomorrow wouldn't bring disaster, learn that having people stand beside you meant you didn't have to face everything alone. Thank you, she said again. To all of them. I don't know how to repay. You don't, Garrett interrupted. That's not how this works. We don't keep score. We just show up when people need us. That's the code. But I have to do something. You saved my life, saved Wyatt's life. There is something, Rachel said. She glanced at Garrett. He nodded. What? Marlene asked. Let us fix your window. The one Vincent's people broke. Let us help you make some repairs around here. The equipment that's barely working, the roof that leaks, let us invest in this place. Make it somewhere the club can stop when we're passing through. Give us a home base in Bakersfield, and you give us good coffee and decent food and a place where bikers are welcome. Marlene blinked. That's it. That's what you want to be customers. Regular customers, Garrett said. The kind who bring friends, the kind who tell other clubs this is a good place to stop. The kind who makes sure you have enough business that $200 a week doesn't matter anymore because you're making that in a day. It wasn't charity, wasn't a handout. It was an investment, a partnership. A way for Marlene to keep her pride while accepting help she desperately needed. Okay, she said. Yes, okay. Garrett smiled, first real smile she'd seen from him. Good, then let's get to work. The glass company came on Tuesday. Marlene stood outside watching them measure the front window. The one Vincent's people had broken 4 nights ago. The one she'd covered with plywood because she couldn't afford to replace it. The plywood was still there, spray-painted with someone's tag. She'd been planning to leave it that way, indefinitely, because $700 for a new window might as well have been $7 million. But Garrett had made a call, and now 3 men in work uniforms were taking measurements and talking about tempered glass and installation schedules like this was perfectly normal. Like bikers paid for windows for struggling diner owners every day. Thursday morning, the foreman said, We'll have it installed by noon. Good as new. How much do I owe? Marlene asked, even though she knew the answer. Already taken care of, ma'am. You're all set. They left. Marlene stood on the sidewalk staring at the plywood. 2 more days and the window would be fixed. The constant reminder of Vincent's threat would be gone. The evidence that she'd been scared and vulnerable and unable to defend herself would be erased. But she'd never forget. Would never forget standing behind the counter, watching Marcus Webb point a gun at her face. Would never forget the absolute certainty that she was about to die. That Wyatt was about to lose his mother. That everything she'd built would end in violence and blood and a closed diner no one would remember. Except she hadn't died, because Garrett had moved fast enough, because the police had been coordinating with him, because standing her ground had worked even though every instinct had screamed to run. Rachel pulled up on her bike, dismounted, walked over. Glass company came, just left, Thursday installation. Good, Garrett's got contractors coming tomorrow. He wants to look at your roof, and that stove, and the walk-in cooler that sounds like it's dying. Marlene shook her head. This is too much. I can't let you. Yes, you can, and you will, because that's how this works. We invest in our people. We take care of our own. And whether you like it or not, you're one of ours now. I barely know you, and you know us well enough. You know we show up when we say we will. You know we keep our word. You know we'll stand between you and anyone who tries to hurt you. That's more than most people can say about their blood family. Rachel wasn't wrong. Marlene's own family had been gone for years. Father who left when she was 3, mother who died when she was 19. No siblings, no cousins who stayed in touch. For 8 years it had been just her and Wyatt against the world. And now suddenly there were 8 bikers who decided the Brooks family mattered, who decided protecting them was worth the risk, who'd shown up with tools and contractors and a willingness to rebuild what Vincent had tried to destroy. I don't know how to accept help, Marlene said quietly. Learn, because you're going to get a lot of it over the next few weeks. Wednesday morning brought the contractors, 5 of them, plus Garrett and 3 other Hells Angels who apparently had construction experience. They descended on the Red Oak Diner like a well-organized army. The roof first. 12 tiles were cracked or missing. Water damage in the northeast corner. The contractors stripped it down to the underlayment, replaced everything, resealed it properly. Work that should have cost $3,000. Then the stove, the one that only worked on 2 burners because the ignition system was shot. They pulled it out, replaced it with a refurbished 6-burner commercial range that looked like it belonged in a real restaurant. The walk-in cooler, the compressor was dying, making grinding sounds that meant it would quit completely any day. They brought in a refrigeration specialist. New compressor, new door seals. Suddenly, the cooler that had been barely functional worked better than the day Marlene had bought the diner. She tried to help. They wouldn't let her, just told her to keep the coffee coming and let them work. So she made pot after pot of coffee and watched these strangers tear apart her diner and put it back together better than it had ever been. Wyatt was in heaven. He followed the contractors around asking questions. How do you seal a roof? What makes a compressor work? Why does that tool make that sound? They answered every question patiently, showed him how things worked, let him hold tools and hand them wrenches and feel useful. This was what childhood should look like, Marlene thought. Not bessing tables at 8 years old, not watching your mother count pennies, but this, learning, exploring, being excited about the world instead of afraid of it. At lunch, Garrett found Marlene behind the counter. She was making sandwiches for the work crew. 15 sandwiches, more food than she'd served some entire days. How you holding up? He asked. Overwhelmed, grateful, terrified this is going to end, and I'll wake up and realize it was all a dream. Not a dream. This is real. We're really fixing your diner. We're really making sure you don't have to struggle like you've been struggling. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why do you care this much? You don't know me. Don't owe me anything. Why are you doing all this? Garrett was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you know what the worst part of being homeless was? It wasn't being cold or hungry. It was being invisible. People walking past you like you weren't there, like you didn't matter, Like your suffering was so normal, so expected that it didn't even register anymore. I spent 6 months being nobody, being nothing. And then someone saw me. Someone decided I mattered. And that changed everything. He looked at her. Wyatt saw me, saw danger and warned me, decided a stranger's life mattered enough to risk his own safety. 8 years old and he had more courage than most adults. That matters. You matter. And I'm making sure you both know it. Marlene felt tears burn her eyes. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just let us help. Let us be family. That's enough. The work continued through Thursday and Friday. The window went in Thursday morning. Perfect. Sparkling. The contractor even cleaned the frame and adjusted the door that had been sticking for 2 years. Suddenly the entrance looked professional, welcoming. Friday brought cosmetic upgrades, fresh paint on the walls. The sickly yellow that had been there when Marlene bought the place transformed into a warm cream color that made the whole space feel bigger, lighter. The booths were cleaned and repaired, tiers in the vinyl patched, the counter polished until it gleamed. By Friday evening, the Red Oak Diner looked like a different place. Not fancy, not trendy, but clean, well-maintained, the kind of place people would choose to eat instead of just settle for because nothing better was nearby. What's all this going to cost? Marlene asked Garrett. They were standing outside watching the contractors pack up their tools. 42,000. The number hit her like a punch. $42,000. That's more than I make in a year. That's an investment in this place and you. Every club member chipped in, some $100, some $1,000. Rachel personally covered the roof because she said every woman deserves a space that doesn't leak when it rains. I'll never be able to pay you back. Don't want you to. Just want you to succeed. Want this place to become what it could be. A rare, real business. Something you own instead of something that owns you. And what do you get out of this? A place to stop when we're riding through. Good coffee, decent food, a friend we can count on. That's worth $42,000 to us. More than worth it. Marlene looked at the diner. Her diner. Still hers, but transformed. Given a second chance she'd never thought possible. Thank you, she whispered, for all of it, for believing we were worth saving. You were always worth saving, Garrett said. You just needed someone to see it. The following Monday, Detective Morrison came by, sat at the counter, ordered coffee, waited until the lunch rush settled before he spoke. We got the preliminary hearing scheduled. 3 weeks from today, Vincent and Marcus are both pleading not guilty, claiming the phone recording was coerced, claiming Marcus acted alone with the gun, claiming Vincent had no knowledge of any plan to hurt you. But that's not true. Vincent threatened me. I have him on tape. I know, and the DA knows, and the judge will know, but that's their strategy. Deny everything, make us prove it. Standard playbook for these cases. What happens at the hearing? We present evidence. You testify. Garrett testifies about the attempted kidnapping. We show the recording. We show the pattern of extortion. If the judge agrees there's enough evidence, it goes to trial. Full criminal trial. Federal charges. How long will that take? 6 months, maybe 8. They'll drag it out as long as possible. Try to wear you down, make you too tired to testify. But I've seen the evidence. We've got them. It's just a matter of time. Marlene nodded. 6 months of waiting, 6 months of wondering if Vincent would somehow get out. If he'd send someone else. If standing up to him would turn out to be the biggest mistake of her life. Morrison seemed to read her thoughts. They're not getting out on bail. The gun changes everything. Assault with a deadly weapon on a witness in an active investigation. Federal flight risk. They're locked up until trial. And after trial, they're going away for 20 years minimum. You're safe, Marlene. Your son is safe. I promise you that. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the system would work, that justice would actually be served, that she could finally stop looking over her shoulder. Okay, she said, I'll testify, whatever you need. Good, because 23 other business owners are watching this case. If you testify and we win, they'll come forward too. We can dismantle Vincent's entire operation, free everyone he's been terrorizing. You're not just saving yourself, you're saving all of them. The weight of that settled on her shoulders. 23 other people, 23 other families, all of them waiting to see if standing up to Vincent was possible. If one woman could change everything. No pressure. November brought the preliminary hearing. Marlene wore the only nice clothes she owned, black pants from Goodwill, white blouse she'd bought for a job interview 6 years ago. Her hands shook as she walked into the courthouse. Garrett beside her, Rachel on the other side, a wall of support. The courtroom was smaller than she expected. Vincent and Marcus sat at the defense table in orange jumpsuits. Both looked thinner, harder. Vincent's fake charm was completely gone. What remained was ugly, brutal, the real man underneath the performance. Marcus didn't look at her, didn't look at anyone, just stared at the table with dead eyes. The hearing took 4 hours. The prosecution presented evidence. The recording, testimony from the police who'd arrested Marcus with the gun, testimony from business owners who'd been paying Vincent for years but were too scared to come forward until now. Then it was Marlene's turn. She walked to the witness stand on legs that barely supported her, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat down. The prosecutor was a woman named Jennifer Walsh, mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She'd talked to Marlene 3 times preparing for this, knew exactly what questions to ask. Ms. Brooks, how long have you owned the Red Oak Diner? 8 years. And how long have you been paying Vincent Caruso protection money? 2 years. How much per week? $200. Over 2 years, that's approximately $20,000. Is that correct? Yes. Did you want to pay this money? No. Then why did you? Marlene looked at Vincent. He was staring at her, face impassive, but his eyes held malice. Pure hatred. Because he threatened me. Said if I didn't pay, bad things would happen. My windows would break. My equipment would break. My customers would stop coming. And if I still didn't pay, worse things would happen. Things involving my son. Did he ever explicitly threaten your son? Yes, on Monday, October 14th. He said accidents happen, fires start, children walking home from school take wrong turns. He made it clear that refusing to pay would result in harm to my 8-year-old son. And you recorded this conversation? Yes. They played the recording. Vincent's voice filled the courtroom. Every threat, every menacing word, every explicit admission that he ran a protection racket. When it finished, Jennifer Walsh asked, "Is that Vincent Caruso's voice on that recording?" Yes. And were you forced or coerced into recording that conversation? No, I recorded it to protect myself, to have evidence. One final question, Ms. Brooks. When Marcus Webb entered your diner with a gun, what did you think was going to happen? Marlene's voice dropped to a whisper. I thought he was going to kill me. I thought my son was going to watch his mother die. I thought everything I'd built was going to end in violence because I'd refused to keep paying. Thank you. No further questions. Vincent's lawyer tried to poke holes in her testimony, tried to suggest she'd misunderstood, that Vincent was just collecting legitimate debts, that the recording was taken out of context. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recording spoke for itself. The judge ruled in under an hour. The case would proceed to trial. Vincent Caruso and Marcus Webb would remain in custody. Trial date set for April. Morrison caught Marlene outside the courthouse. You did great in there, really great. This case is solid. They're going down. 6 more months, Marlene said, exhausted. 6 more months of waiting. But you can wait knowing they're locked up, knowing you're safe. That's something. It was something. It had to be enough. December brought the first real profits. The renovated diner attracted new customers. People who'd driven past for years suddenly noticed it. The new window gleamed. The fresh paint made it look cared for. Word spread that the coffee was good and the food was honest and the atmosphere was welcoming. The Hells Angels made it their regular stop, not just Bakersfield chapter. Riders from other cities, other states. They'd pull up in groups of 5 or 10, park their bikes in a neat row, come inside for breakfast or lunch or dinner. They were polite, respectful, tipped well, and their presence made it clear this diner was under protection. Anyone who messed with Marlene Brooks was messing with Hells Angels, and nobody wanted that. Revenue tripled. November had been good. December was better. By Christmas, Marlene was clearing $1,500 profit per month, more than she'd made in the entire previous year. She hired help, 2 part-time cooks, a waitress for the evening shift. Finally, after 8 years, she didn't have to do everything herself, didn't have to be cook and server and dishwasher and cleaner all at once. On December 23rd, she signed a lease on a small house 3 blocks from the diner. 2 bedrooms, a yard, a front porch, $800 a month. She could afford it. For the first time in 8 years, she could afford an actual home. Wyatt cried when she told him. Happy tears. He'd have his own room, his own space, a place that wasn't the back of a diner. A place where he could have friends over and do homework at a real desk and feel like a normal kid. They moved in on New Year's Day. The Hells Angels showed up with a truck, helped move the few belongings they had. Rachel brought dishes from her own collection. Garrett brought a table and chairs. Other club members brought blankets, towels, kitchen supplies. By evening, the house felt like a home. Wyatt sat on the front porch in a chair too big for him, grinning like he'd won the lottery. This is really ours, he asked. We get to stay here. Really ours, Marlene confirmed. For as long as we want. Forever. Maybe forever. Wyatt hugged her. Best day of my life, Mama. Best day ever. Marlene looked around at the bikers lounging in her yard, drinking beer and telling stories. At Rachel helping unpack boxes in the kitchen. At Garrett assembling a bed frame in Wyatt's new room. At this family they'd found by accident and kept by choice. Mine too, baby. Mine too. April brought the trial and it lasted 6 days. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The recording, testimony from Marlene and Garrett and 4 other business owners who'd finally found the courage to come forward. Testimony from the police who'd arrested Marcus with the gun. Financial records showing Vincent had collected over $300,000 over 3 years from 23 different businesses. The defense tried everything. Character witnesses claiming Vincent was a good man, claims that the recording was manipulated. Suggestions that Marcus had acted alone and Vincent had no knowledge of any criminal activity. The jury didn't buy it, deliberated for 3 hours, came back with their verdict. Vincent Caruso guilty on all counts. Extortion, racketeering, conspiracy, 23 years federal prison. Marcus Webb guilty on all counts. Assault with a deadly weapon. Conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder. 27 years federal prison. No possibility of parole for 20. Marlene sat in the courtroom and watched them led away in chains. Vincent was shouting about appeals. Marcus was silent, dead-eyed, a man with nothing left to lose. Outside the courthouse, Morrison found her. It's over, really over. They're going to prison for the next 2 decades. You're free, Marlene. You did it. She couldn't speak, could barely process it. 2 years of fear, 6 months of waiting, and now suddenly it was finished. Vincent couldn't hurt her, couldn't threaten Wyatt, couldn't take everything she'd built. She turned to Garrett. He was standing a few feet away, watching her with something that looked like pride. We did it, she whispered. No, Garrett said. You did it. You stood your ground. You testified. You refused to back down. That was all you. I couldn't have done it without you. Maybe, but you're the one who decided to stop running. That was your choice, your bravery. Don't let anyone take that from you. Marlene felt something break open in her chest. Some final wall she'd been holding up. Some last defense against believing she deserved good things. Against trusting that maybe finally life could be something other than survival. She started crying right there on the courthouse steps, crying in front of Garrett and Rachel and Detective Morrison and a dozen strangers passing by, crying because it was over, because she'd won, because standing her ground had worked even though every instinct had screamed that it was impossible. Garrett pulled her into a hug, let her cry against his shoulder, didn't say anything, just held her while 2 years of fear drained away. When she finally pulled back, he was smiling. You hungry? I know a great diner about 3 blocks from here. She laughed, watery, broken, but real. Yeah, let's go home. The grand reopening happened on a Saturday in May, not because the diner had been closed, but because Marlene wanted to mark the moment, wanted to celebrate the transformation, wanted to acknowledge that the Red Oak Diner wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving. They put up banners. Red Oak Diner, under new management. The joke was that it was the same management, But it wasn't. Not really, because the Marlene who ran this diner now was fundamentally different from the terrified woman who'd opened the doors 6 months ago. 150 people showed up, Hell's Angels from 3 states, regular customers, business owners who'd been freed from Vincent's extortion, Detective Morrison, Judge Patricia Henderson, who'd presided over the trial, media from local news stations who'd been covering the story. Marlene stood behind the counter watching the crowd, Wyatt beside her in his honorary Hell's Angels vest. The patch on the back read, "The Kid Who Spoke Up." He wore it everywhere, slept in it sometimes. It was his most prized possession. Rachel clinked a glass. The room quieted. Most of you know the story. Marlene Brooks was being extorted for 2 years, paying protection money she couldn't afford, living in fear. Her 8-year-old son saw something wrong and spoke up, saved a life, started a chain reaction that ended with one of the biggest racketeering cases this county has seen in a decade. She paused. But that's not why we're here. We're here because Marlene didn't run, didn't give up, stood her ground even when it was terrifying, even when it meant risking everything. She showed us what real courage looks like, and the Hells Angels are proud to call her family. Applause filled the diner. Marlene felt her face flush, wasn't used to attention, wasn't comfortable being celebrated, but Rachel gestured for her to speak. Marlene took a breath. 6 months ago, I was ready to pack a bag and disappear, to run away from Bakersfield and never come back. I'd spent my whole life running, from poverty, from failure, from anything that scared me, and I'd taught my son that running was how you survived. She looked at Wyatt. Then he did something that changed everything. He saw danger and he didn't run. He didn't hide. He warned a stranger, saved a life, and showed me that sometimes standing your ground is braver than running. Her voice got stronger. I'm not going to stand here and say I wasn't terrified. I was, every day, but I had people stand with me. People who barely knew me but decided I was worth protecting. People who rebuilt my diner, who rebuilt my life, who showed me what family looks like when it's chosen instead of given. She gestured around the renovated diner. This place isn't just mine anymore. It belongs to everyone who helped make it possible. Every person who stood with me. Every person who believed I could do this even when I didn't believe it myself. This is our place, and everyone here is welcome. Always. More applause. Wyatt tugged her sleeve. Can I say something? Marlene nodded, lifted him up so he could see over the counter. Wyatt's voice was small but clear. I want to thank Mr. Garrett for teaching me that helping people is always the right thing to do, even when it's scary. Even when you don't know if it'll work, you do it anyway, because that's what makes you brave. He looked around the crowd. And I want to thank all the bikers for fixing our diner, and for being my friends, and for showing me and Mama that we're not alone anymore. The room erupted, people clapping, whistling, some crying. This 8-year-old boy who'd started everything with a whispered warning had just summed up what they were all feeling. Garrett stood, walked to the counter, pulled something from his vest. Wyatt, when Hell's Angels want to honor someone, we don't give trophies or certificates. We give patches, symbols that mean something, that represent who you are and what you've done. He held up a leather patch, beautifully made, embroidered with care. It showed an angel with motorcycle wings. Underneath, Guardian Red Oak Diner. This goes above the door. So everyone who walks in knows this diner is protected. This family is protected. Anyone who comes here is safe. That's our promise. For as long as you want it, Marlene couldn't speak, could barely see through tears. This was more than protection, more than charity. This was belonging. This was home. Garrett mounted the patch above the entrance. Perfect placement. Visible from the street. A declaration and a promise. The party continued until midnight. People eating, laughing, sharing stories. The diner more full of life than it had been in 8 years. As people started leaving, Garrett found Marlene. Got a minute. They stepped outside. May evening in Bakersfield. Warm, stars overhead. The parking lot full of motorcycles gleaming under streetlights. I wanted to ask you something, Garrett said. uncharacteristically hesitant. The club rides to the coast every summer. Big trip, 3 days. We camp on the beach, cook out, just relax. I was wondering if you and Wyatt would want to come. Not on bikes, obviously. You could drive and meet us there. Rachel's sister usually comes, brings her kids. It's a family thing. Marlene looked at him. Really looked. This man who'd walked into her life 6 months ago and changed everything. Who'd protected her, believed in her, stood beside her when running would have been easier. And somewhere along the way, something had shifted. He wasn't just a protector anymore. Wasn't just a friend. He was something more. Something she wasn't quite ready to name but couldn't ignore. "I'd like that," she said. "We'd both like that." Garrett smiled. "Good, because I was going to keep asking until you said yes." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last few bikers ride away, engines fading into the night. "You know what the best part of all this is?" Marlene asked. "What?" "I'm not afraid anymore. For 8 years, I woke up afraid, went to bed afraid, afraid of losing the diner, afraid of not having enough money, afraid of Vincent, afraid of everything. And now I wake up and I'm just excited, excited to open the diner, excited to see what the day brings, excited about the future instead of terrified of it." "That's what freedom looks like," Garrett said. "That's what you earned." "We earned," Marlene corrected. "I couldn't have done this alone." "No, but you had to choose to let us help. That was the hardest part. Letting people in, trusting strangers. That took more courage than standing up to Vincent." They went back inside. The diner was empty now, except for Wyatt. He'd fallen asleep in one of the booths, curled up like a cat, face peaceful. Marlene looked around at the gleaming counter, the fresh paint, the new equipment, the guardian patch above the door, at this space that had been a burden and was now a blessing. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, terrified, alone, ready to run at the first sign of trouble. And she thought about the woman she was now, still scared sometimes, but no longer alone, no longer convinced that survival meant staying invisible. "What are you thinking?" Garrett asked. "That I almost missed this, almost ran away, almost taught my son that courage means running instead of standing. And I'm grateful I didn't. I'm grateful Wyatt had more courage than I did. Grateful you didn't walk away when you could have. Grateful for all of it. Even the scary parts. Especially the scary parts. Because those are the parts that changed me, made me stronger, made me into someone who doesn't run anymore." Garrett nodded. "You were always that person. You just needed a reason to believe it." They carried Wyatt to the car, drove the 3 blocks to the house, tucked him into his own bed in his own room, in a house that was theirs. Marlene kissed his forehead, watched him sleep. This was what she'd been fighting for, not just survival, but this, a child who slept peacefully instead of afraid, a home that felt safe, a future that looked bright instead of desperate. Garrett stood in the doorway. "I should go. Let you get some rest. Thank you for everything, for tonight, for the last 6 months, for showing up when I needed someone. That's what family does." Family. The word settled over her like a blanket. Warm, comforting, true. "Yeah," Marlene said, "that's what family does." 1 year later, October 12th, anniversary of the day Wyatt had whispered a warning that changed 3 lives. Anniversary of the day Marlene had stopped running and started fighting. The Red Oak Diner was packed. Saturday morning rush, but bigger. People who'd heard the story, who wanted to support the woman who'd stood up to Vincent Caruso, who wanted to eat at the diner the Hells Angels called home. Marlene moved through the chaos with practiced ease, taking orders, pouring coffee, laughing with regulars who'd become friends. She'd hired 3 more people. The diner was open 7 days a week now, but she only worked 5, had Sundays and Mondays off, time to spend with Wyatt, time to breathe. Revenue had quintupled. She'd paid off every debt, started a savings account, had enough money that she didn't count pennies anymore, didn't panic when unexpected expenses came up, could buy Wyatt new clothes instead of thrift store hand-me-downs. She'd enrolled him in Little League. He was terrible at baseball but loved it anyway, made friends, had play dates, did normal kid things, and she'd started dating Garrett, officially, slowly. They'd been dancing around it for months, But 3 weeks ago, he'd asked her to dinner, not as friends, as something more. And she'd said yes. It was terrifying in the best way. Opening herself up to someone, trusting someone with her heart after years of protecting it. But Garrett was patient, understanding, content to move at her pace. To let things develop naturally instead of rushing. At noon, the Hells Angels arrived. 20 bikes. They'd made it a tradition. Every October 12th, a ride to Bakersfield. A celebration of the day one of their own had been saved by an 8-year-old's courage. They filed into the diner, Garrett and Rachel in the lead. They'd brought gifts, a new sign for outside, hand-carved wood, beautiful craftsmanship. It read Red Oak Diner, where family gathers. Wyatt ran to Garrett. He was 9 now, taller, more confident, still wore his vest everywhere, still considered himself an honorary Hells Angel. "Mr. Garrett, did you see my last baseball game? I actually hit the ball. It only went like 10 feet, but I hit it." "I heard. Your mom sent me a video. You look like a natural." "I'm definitely not a natural, but I'm getting better." They hung the new sign, perfect placement, visible from the highway, an invitation and a promise. After lunch, Garrett pulled Marlene aside. "Can we take a walk?" They left the diner, walked the 3 blocks to her house, sat on the front porch. The porch where Wyatt had cried happy tears when he learned they were moving. The porch that had become their favorite spot for morning coffee and evening conversations. "A year ago today, I walked into your diner to sell a motorcycle," Garrett said, "and your son saved my life. I've thought a lot about that moment, about how different everything would be if he hadn't warned me, if you hadn't let us help, if you'd run instead of stayed. I think about it too, every day. I wanted to give you something to mark the anniversary." He pulled out a small box. "It's not a ring. That would be too fast. We're not there yet, but I wanted you to have something that meant something." Marlene opened the box. Inside was a silver necklace, a pendant in the shape of an oak leaf, delicate, beautiful. Engraved on the back, "Courage isn't not being afraid, it's standing anyway." Her eyes filled with tears. "Garrett, this is beautiful. You're the strongest person I know. Not because you're fearless, but because you're about terrified and you do it anyway. You stand your ground, you protect your son, you build a life worth living. That's real strength." Marlene couldn't speak, just put the necklace on, felt the weight of it against her chest. A reminder, a promise to herself. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for believing in me, for showing up every single time I needed someone." That's what family does. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood, the street where Wyatt played with friends, the house that had become home, the life they'd built from the ruins of fear. "You know what I realized," Marlene said. "I spent 8 years thinking the diner was a trap, a burden, something that kept me stuck. But it wasn't. It was a foundation, something solid when everything else was unstable, something I could build on once I stopped being so afraid. And now it's what I always wanted it to be, a home, a place where people gather, where they're safe, where they're welcome. Not just a business, something more." "That's because you made it that," Garrett said. "You and Wyatt. You took what Vincent tried to destroy and you transformed it into something beautiful." They went back to the diner. The celebration was still going, people eating, laughing. Wyatt in the middle of a group of bikers who were teaching him to play poker with matchsticks instead of money. Marlene looked around, at this life she'd built, at this family she'd found, at this future that had seemed impossible 12 months ago. She thought about the woman she'd been, terrified, alone, ready to run at the first sign of trouble. And she thought about the woman she was now, still scared sometimes, but no longer alone, no longer convinced that survival meant staying small and invisible and afraid. She'd learned what Wyatt had tried to teach her that October morning. That courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was standing your ground even when your knees were shaking and your hands were trembling and every instinct screamed to run. It was choosing to trust strangers who became family, choosing to believe that good people existed, choosing to build instead of hide. And most importantly, it was teaching her son that the way you survived in this world wasn't by keeping your head down and never making waves. It was by standing up when something was wrong, by asking for help when you needed it, by believing that one person could make a difference. Because one person had. An 8-year-old boy who'd whispered 6 words to a stranger. Drive away, it's a trap. 6 words that had saved 3 lives. Garrett's, Wyatt's, and Marlene's. Because sometimes being saved meant being seen, being believed, being told you mattered. And sometimes the people who saved you were the ones you'd never expected. The ones who showed up when everyone else walked away. The ones who decided your life was worth fighting for even when you'd stopped fighting for yourself. Marlene looked at Garrett across the diner. He was laughing at something Rachel said, looked relaxed, happy. He caught her eye, smiled, a smile that said everything would be okay, that they were exactly where they were supposed to be. And for the first time in 8 years, Marlene believed it. She was home, finally, truly, home. Not because of the diner or the house or the money in her savings account, but because of them. These people, this family, this feeling of belonging that she'd been searching for her entire life without knowing what she was looking for. The sun set over Bakersfield, golden hour light streaming through the new window, illuminating the guardian patch above the door, casting everything in warm tones that made the whole space glow. Wyatt ran over. Mama, Mr. Garrett says maybe next summer we can go on a real motorcycle ride. Just a short one. Is that okay? Marlene ruffled his hair. We'll see, baby. We'll see. That means yes, Wyatt said confidently. He hugged her tight. Best life ever, Mama. Best life ever. And standing in her diner surrounded by family chosen rather than given, holding her son who'd been brave enough to save them both, Marlene had to agree. Best life ever, because they'd stopped running, because they'd stood their ground, because they'd learned that sometimes the scariest thing, trusting people, accepting help, believing you deserve good things, was also the most important thing. And that made all the difference.